Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Just before we begin, just wanted to thank everyone for making time today. I know a lot of people tried to dial in last week, and unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond our control, with Hurricane Irma affecting the servers of GoToWebinar in the US, we were not able to go ahead, but I'm delighted to have you all here today to share this exciting content and introduce you to Dr. Jeannie Trudel. So, a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce Jeannie. Great, excellent. So if anyone has any questions, if you've attended our webinars before, you'll know that we come to the questions at the end. The question box is in your GoToWebinar toolbar, which is typically on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you do have a question for Dr. Trudel or for myself, please pop that in throughout the session and we'll come to those at the end. Always like to hear what people have to say, even if you've got a comment about how you've managed workplace conflict in your own organisation, or a question or something that's happened, we'd love to hear from you. So looking forward to seeing those questions come through throughout the session. Now for a bit of an introduction, so my name's Amelia Wilson. I'm the Partnerships Manager for Excelsia College Online, which means that I work with businesses and schools to promote education and support education goals of staff and members and so on in the community. Now today I've got with me Dr. Jeannie Trudel. So Jeannie's an expert in workplace conflict and organisational behaviour. Jeannie's our MBA Program Director here at Excelsia College, and she's got a global background, having worked and lived in 3 countries. Her call to higher ed has involved serving in varied roles, including full-time faculty dean, associate vice president for strategic initiatives. Through various organisations, she served as a trainer and organisational development consultant in corporate and not-for-profits in Boston, Los Angeles, and Louisville. She also teaches the graduate and undergraduate business programs. Jeannie's formerly a solicitor here in Australia and subsequently served as a court-appointed and approved mediator in Los Angeles, Boston, and Louisville. Dr. Trudel has a strong interest in conflict management in the workplace, and her research area is on workplace incivility. So welcome, Jeannie.
Thank you very much, Amelia.
So we'll come to Jeannie's insight into managing workplace conflict in just a moment. But for those of you on the line that are just about to start studying with us, or have thought about studying with us, or have come across our website, you'll know a little bit about Excelsia College already. Some of you might be quite new, so I thought I'd give a bit of an overview on the college. Then we'll pass over to Jeannie to look at the workplace conflict content. And then at the end, we'll just give you a little bit more information about how you can continue on your learning journey with Excelsia through our online degrees. And then at the end, we'll come through to all those questions, which will be great. So Excelsia College was established in 1983 as the Wesley Institute in Sydney. We're based in Macquarie Park, and we work in partnership with Indiana Wesleyan University, which is one of the largest providers of Christian higher education in the US. They pioneered a lot of online and distance education and have 95 years of experience. As a Christian college, faith is at the centre of everything we do at Excelsia and very much drives a lot of the course content. A lot of people have met us at various Christian conferences. A lot of our graduates work in Christian organisations, and faith-based education is really at the heart of what we do. In 2017, we've launched 2 accelerated online degrees, so really to bring what we do at Excelsia College to a broader market and allow people to study from all over the country and internationally as well. So really excited to share a little bit more about those online degrees with you later on. So I'm just going to pass over to you now, Jeannie. Looking forward to hearing about workplace conflict.
Thank you very much, Amelia. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to spend this time with you, and we've got a little bit of ground to cover. Hopefully at the end of this, you will learn something about how you personally react or manage conflict and come away with some strategies for managing workplace conflict. So first question that I'm going to get you guys to reflect. What comes to mind when you hear or see the word conflict? Sometimes, for some, it would be chilling. You get a little bit nervous about it, or sometimes you might even get angry or uncomfortable, irritable. So Another question I have, to try and get some insights about how you manage conflict, think about what you, how you learned to handle conflict growing up. How did your parents manage conflict? So quick story. I grew up in a household where managing conflict means yelling, a lot of yelling. When people are not happy, when parents are not happy, they yell. So my take on conflict is that it's about anger and it's about yelling. One of two ways: you can either internalize that and be very quiet, or you yell back. On the other hand, when I think about my husband, he was brought up in a conflict-free household. Now, you guys know that that's not true, because in every home there is conflict, but that was how he was brought up. Conflict did not exist because it was avoided. So guess what? He didn't like to admit that there's conflict. So his way of managing conflict is avoidance. So how you grew up and what you learn about managing conflict has an impact on how you manage conflict in the workplace. So when I looked at, the definition of conflict, think about this. In the Merriam-Webster dictionary, one of the first definitions is fight, battle, war, and armed conflict. For some of us, that's how we think about conflict. It's something that is negative in connotation. Another way of looking at conflict is that it's a type of struggle resulting from incompatible or opposing needs, drives, wishes, external or internal demands. This is the Merriam-Webster dictionary. You can come up with your own definition of conflict. Now, conflict can be positive. You might ask, why? How? Well, think about it. Sometimes at the workplace, when you have a conflict about how things are going to be done, and that's called a task-based conflict, you can come up with some better ideas about how to do things. So your way is not necessarily the best way. Somebody else's way may not be the best way. But in managing the conflict and talking it out, it could be very positive. Amidst all this, when I think about conflict, one of the key principles that I like to remind people is from Philippians 2:4. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. It's very difficult to do that in conflict, but I think if we look at that, it's not just about me. It might be helpful. So let me go to talk a little bit more about the sources of conflict. What do I mean by sources of conflict? In every conflict, there might be different origins or different platforms for the conflict. So, for instance, let's say, let's take values. What is a value conflict? What do I mean by that? A value conflict has to do with belief systems, right or wrong, etc. Those are very hard to change. You can't change my values. I can't change yours. But they do come up in the workplace, don't they? And then externals or moods. If someone is in a bad mood, it's very unlikely that you're going to change someone's mood. So it may be a difficult a place to kind of figure out how to deal with conflicts. We'll talk a little bit about strategies in a little bit. I'll go over to the left side. Relationship conflicts are ones that base on perhaps negative, repetitive behaviors, strong emotions. Now, I already can tell that some of you, just guessing, are already thinking, yep, I have some of those in the workplace, either past or present. Somebody that you may not be able to get along with, and you wonder, how am I going to navigate the workplace when this kind of conflicts come up? Another area of conflict is data, and then there's structure and interest. I'm going to go over to the next slide and talk a little bit more about these sources, okay? Look at that. Relationship conflict, as I said, it could relate to strong emotions. You think about somebody and that somebody irks you. That's emotion. If you have someone that you like to work with, etc., conflicts when they arise are actually more manageable. I'm sure you agree with me. But somebody that you consistently have bad experiences with, you already have a reaction before you even delve too deep into what's going on that's causing that's manifesting itself as a conflict. So data information conflict, look at that. There are times when you have conflicts at work, arguments, because one of you may not have the information, or both of you or more of you do not have the information in front of you to make a decision. Sometimes it's the wrong information, or TMI, you've heard of that, right? Too much information. When you have too much information, sometimes it's hard to narrow down and make decisions and deal with workplace issues. And then there's also the type of disagreement over how data is collected, because if you have different ways of collecting data, you may not come to an agreement about the appropriate data to use in order to make decisions. I've talked about externals. Let me focus a little bit on interest conflict. Think about it. We each come to a conflict or come to the workplace with different wants, needs, fears, hopes, concerns. So for instance, if I really want something done quickly, that's my interest. Your interest may be something to do with, I want things done well. Well, that could be my interest too, but you may not be able to find that out because we're busy arguing about who's right. So you have to kind of figure out what the interests are in order to meet each other's needs. Structural conflict. This is an area that's a little bit difficult to, if this is the source of your conflict, it could be a little bit difficult to manage, because when it comes to structural conflict, it may be things that you cannot change. For instance, reporting lines. Those are authority issues. Organizational structures. If there are some things that you want done that cannot be done because you don't have authority, and the person that you're arguing with doesn't have authority either. That's a structural conflict. The two of you may not be able to resolve that. So you might have to look at other ways to manage the conflict and bring it to one of the other more manageable areas. I hope that's making sense to you. Please feel free to jot down questions as this comes along. As they occur. And then the value conflict I covered briefly. This is also very difficult to manage. You can't change other people's values. So what do? Right? This is the question. If you have a conflict and you think, oh, well, that's a relationship conflict, that's more manageable. But if it's a structural or a value conflict, you may not be able to change the other person's mind or manage it on your own. So what do you do with that? Well, let's practice and see if what I've said so far makes sense, and then we can talk a little bit more about strategies, okay? So let's go to a conflict example, and let's read this. You're in a hurry. Your coworker, who knows you fairly well, asks you to help with a task. She needs it done quickly. You tell her that you can't because you've got to go. You don't have time. And you found out later that she's upset with you. So what are some possible sources of conflict? It could be one or more than one. I'm just going to get you to vote on this. Take a quick poll, whether it's relationship. Is it because of your relationship between the two of you? Is it structure? Is it something that you can't change in terms of authority or time? Or is it data? Is it that you don't have some information between the both of you? Is it A and B or B and C? So,
so just give people a few more seconds to get your answer in. Quite good to see what people are thinking. All right, fabulous. I might close it off now.
Okay.
And so this is what.
Excellent. Okay. For those who identify it as a relationship conflict, bingo, very good. That's one of the two areas. It's definitely relationship. And I'm sure you know why. It's because the two of you know each other. You generally like each other, and suddenly there's something that came up, and you're in conflict. There's also a second part of it, which is structure, and those who put both A and B would be the most correct, okay? Because it has to do with time limitations, which neither of you can control. because you need to go and your coworker doesn't understand that it has to do with time limitations. It's not so much, well, some of you argue that it's data because the other person doesn't know, but really it's not so much data pertaining to the workplace issue, so it's not necessarily data. I hope that makes sense. If you want to push for data, I suppose you can make a case for it, okay? But generally, relationship and structure. So let's go to strategies for conflict sources. What do you do when you have the types of conflict associated with each relationship? I need to go to the next slide.
It should just pop up in a second.
Thank you. That's great. So when it comes to relationship conflicts, what would you have done with that coworker? You encourage direct communication. Go, you know, if you found out you're upset with her, you go directly and say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you I was in a hurry because, you know, I have a doctor's appointment, etc. Allow her to tell you, or him to tell you, that he or she was upset with you. So allow venting of emotions. Recognize the emotional content, and you can move the relationship forward and resolve or manage the conflict. If it is to do with data or information, agree on some sort of process and the content in terms of what kinds of data or what kinds of additional information that would help both of you. That is also a manageable conflict. When it comes to externals and moods, all of us come to the workplace with baggage, okay? Some days are better than others. So if you see that someone is not in a place and it could be contentious or it could be difficult, agree to come back later to discuss. So we set the time. If it is an interest conflict, and most of the time it is based on interest, then communicate needs in terms of talking about what is it that you need from each other, or the reason that you'd like to have this need met. For instance, you know, I may communicate with my colleague, I really do need this information or this task done because I'm under the gun, I have to prepare a report, etc. If you don't communicate your needs, the other person cannot guess what it is that you need. And then very importantly, find common ground. What is the common interest that you may have? You may both want to do your jobs well, or the results are important to both of you. Start from there, because then you will be able to find out if with that common interest, you can find ways to manage a conflict that arise from the situation. And then explore multiple options. There is no one correct way of doing things. So explore the different ways that you can both meet your needs. Structural conflicts, this has to do with time. Well, that's why I said earlier that it may, those who answer structure, actually structural conflict, the example could have related to a structural conflict as well. Look for a way for process, because you may not be able to change authority or reporting lines, but certainly looking for ways to manage a process or how you're going to go about making decisions can help with structural conflicts. And finally, with values, you're not going to win any arguments if you stick to your guns and say that it's my values that trumps everybody else's. All you can do is recognize differences, respect each other, and try and find common ground going back to interests. Okay, lead the conversation back to interests and relationship and data, where things that sources of conflict where you can pull things together and move forward. Don't get stuck on values. So moving on to the last slide, how do we as managers or those who are leaders increase our competence in managing workplace disputes? First of all, model the attitudes and behaviors you want others to emulate. In other words, if you lead from a place of where you are open to listening to others, that's going to be key, because people will feel, even if they don't agree with you, that they are heard. Figure out the cause of conflict, and well, the sources of conflict. Sorry about that. Is it structural or interpersonal? And always try and focus on the task, not on personalities. If you focus on personalities, it's a no-win situation, and you will find it very hard to move on. So what is it that you both need in order to get the work done, and what's the process that will be fair and that you both find acceptable? Very important. Address conflict in a timely way. Don't let it fester, because every time you avoid it, it will come back, and each interaction is fraught with emotions. You get more angry, more irritable, or less inclined to engage. So address it in a timely way and learn from it. Why are you, when you find yourself reacting a certain way in a certain workplace conflict, ask yourself, why is this particular situation engendering such strong emotions? Is it something to do with you? In which case you might want to explore the what's going on in you. Are you stressed? In which case you are more likely to react when normally you may not. And above all, when you look at the other person, not as an adversary, but as someone that God has made in His or her, in His image, what is it that the other person may need from you in order to move forward? So I hope that this has been helpful for you, and please feel free to type some questions at the end that we can address. Back to you, Amelia.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeannie. That was really, really useful and insightful information, especially like the idea of really identifying the source of the conflict so that we can choose the best course of action for how to go about mitigating that conflict or avoiding it in the first place. Also interesting to think about how our upbringing as a child and the type of conflict that we might have had in our family home can influence how we go about managing conflict as a kind of natural response. Also very fascinating, and the difference between you and your husband. I'm sure lots of people find that they have the same kind of different upbringing leading to a different way of approaching conflict. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the questions come through. Now, for those of you dialing in who are thinking, how do I get to learn more from Dr. Jeannie Trudel, or thinking, how do I continue on this learning journey, and how do I take the next step in my career, whether that's to take on a leadership role or a management role, or maybe you're already doing that and you want some more education to support your practice, or perhaps you want to be a specialist, so you're in a business role or an education role and you're looking at specialising and really becoming an expert. We do have 2 online degrees that can help you with the next step in that journey. So those are the Master of Business Administration, so MBA, and the Master of Education. There's a couple of people on the line that have actually commenced studying their Master of Education, and a couple that are thinking about doing the Master of Business Administration, so that's great to see. Welcome. Now, just to give you a really quick summary of the 2 degrees that we've got on offer in that online accelerated mode. The MBA is a 16-unit MBA. Depending on your previous experience and previous study, that can come down to as little as 8 units. Really depends case-by-case basis. And it's an accelerated MBA, so you can complete it part-time while working full-time. As you can see today from learning from Dr. Trudel, our academics are industry accomplished. They deliver practical learning throughout the course. There is a really strong emphasis on values-based knowledge, so looking at Excelsia as a Christian university college and applying values to every unit, looking at things like ethics and values in the workplace. There are 2 exit and entry options. So if you're not sure if the MBA is for you, you might be thinking you want some business fundamentals. You could start with a graduate certificate, which is just 4 units. At the same time, you can start in the MBA and then graduate after 4 units with that grad certificate if you need to leave for some reason. And then 8 units will get you a graduate diploma, either as an entry point or an exit point. The Master of Education, so also offered in that accelerated online mode, so you study part-time while working full-time. The Master of Education is just 8 units in length, so you can complete it in as little as 16 months. We offer the Master of Education with 2 specialisations, so you can specialise in leadership or teaching and learning, and it's really for existing educators, teachers who want to further develop their education career. And at the same time, faith-based learning is at the core of all of the units that we deliver through the Master of Education. There are obviously a couple of units unique to each specialisation, and the enrolment advisor team will be able to talk you through how that works. In both cases, they're in that online study mode that I've talked about, so 100% online. You're most welcome to attend our campus in Macquarie Park, but you might go through the whole degree without ever setting foot in our building, and that's completely fine. Being an accelerated online delivery, it's flexible, so you can log in at the time that suits you. So for some students, that might be public transport on the way to work, might be in the afternoon between getting home and making dinner, might find some time over the weekend, but you'll jump in and out of the learning environment as need be. So it really works around your life. At the same time, you can network with your fellow students throughout that learning environment. So you can make comments and get to know the rest of the cohort at your own time, but definitely feeling connected and seeing what people are doing in their own business or in their own school to tackle a particular topic. Throughout the entire degree, you will have the support of a student success advisor in addition to the academic support provided by the faculty. So the student success advisor is non-academic support. So if you haven't been studying for quite a few years, they'll be able to point you in the right direction for how to write bibliographies, how to access the library materials. They'll remind you that your assignment's due on a particular day and really keep you on track and motivated through to graduation. In terms of quality, there's not a difference between on-campus or online. Online is just a different way of getting your degree done so that it suits your busy life. We do have fee help available, so if you're eligible for fee help, you're able to defer your payment that way. Again, the enrolment advisors can point you in the direction of further information about that. We do have 6 intakes each year, so you'll do 6 teaching periods a year. You get 6 units done in that 12-month period. We've just started one a couple of weeks ago, and the next one starts at the very end of last day of October. So 6 times a year. So we don't need to think about starting study only happens in February and July. You've now got 6 options a year to go and start that degree that you've always wanted to do. Just before we go back to the questions, I just wanted to mention again the partnership opportunities that we do offer. So as partnership manager working with organisations, we're delighted to work with schools and businesses that are looking to deliver learning. So if you wanted to deliver a session like today's session about managing workplace conflict specifically for your staff, let me know. My contact details are up on the screen. I'd be delighted to hear from you about how we can support further learning in your workplace. It might be that we come out and do a session in person, or it might be that we set up an online webinar just for your organisation so that staff members can get the content that they need, whether it's this or something about postgraduate study, something else about leadership in education, whatever it is. Let me know what you're interested in and we'll see if we can organise a time. We do have a couple of sessions coming up in November, so really excited to be working with a number of Christian schools to deliver those. Now we might see if there are any questions. Did anyone have a question? If you've got a question, then currently none in the question and answer. Oh, it's coming through now. One question is, Jeannie, what units in the MBA relate to workplace conflict?
This is one of my favorite units. It's called Organizational Behavior and Leadership. And in the segment about conflict management, you will find out, you will do some assessments about how you personally manage conflict, so your conflict management style. And there's a lot of reflection built into a number of our units so that you don't just learn theory, but you also learn about yourself, reflect on your own skills, and the way that you manage life, not just conflict, but how you lead, how you do in the workplace, your decision-making processes, all that's covered. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeannie.
Come on, others. You surely will have some questions about how to manage a particular person at the workplace where you think, I just don't want to deal with that person. Ask away. This is your opportunity.
It's quite interesting, Jeannie. We had a few questions with the last webinar that we did about managing different scenarios in schools, and how to tackle that related to the topic that Dr. Peter Stiles covered. Do you think there's a difference in the way that we should manage workplace conflict in a school compared with in a business or a not-for-profit, or if we're working for a church?
That's a good question. I think that when we are working in a faith-based environment, the expectations are a bit different than when you work in a secular environment. I'm not sure if there's much difference between managing workplaces in the school versus workplaces in companies or other organizations. I've done a number of workshops in different environments. Conflict is conflict. When you have a disagreement, it could be, the setting might be different, but the sources and the way that people manage or not manage conflict are very similar. So the question is, what do you know about yourself? Okay, so you need to know your own hot buttons, and also to recognize what is it in others that's causing you to react. Sometimes it could be as simple as we indicated earlier, missing information. But sometimes it could be symptoms of something else that has gone on before. So many times, I personally would step back and look at the situation and seek counsel and try not to react immediately.
Great advice, Jeannie. Got a couple of questions here. Is managing conflict and studying specifically for it allowing access to higher positions and jobs? So I think that question is about how it helps with your career development.
I think that absolutely managing conflict is critical, especially as you move into leadership and managerial positions. Most of the time, I think that if I'm not mistaken, about 28% of the time a manager spends is on people issues. Without the conflict management skills, I think it would be very difficult to work with others, especially when you're responsible for a number of people. So the better you manage conflict, whether it's you generating conflict or whether it's others coming to you about their conflicts, or you're managing situations which could be conflictual, it is key that you learn some good strategies on how to manage or resolve conflict.
Yeah, and definitely a good point. As we grow our career, Jeannie, and we're managing more responsibility and a larger team, hopefully we're managing conflict that we didn't create.
Yes.
But good to think about how it's been caused and what we can do to change that. We do have another...
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say, I think many of us can attest to some time or another when you've dealt with someone who reacts in anger, and you can remember your response to it. In the workplace, displays of anger, especially those that are not very controlled, can be detrimental. So you can think of those who have poor self-control and have manifested in the workplace. So think about how you would manage it, how you would calm someone else down and bring them back to task. These are some very, very important skills.
Yeah, great. There's a question along that line in a second, but James asks, what verbal strategies do you recommend for transitioning a conflict from values to an interests conflict?
Most of the time when you have a conflict, it's hard to determine values versus relationship, etc. So when you see that something matters to someone, one of the key things is to allow the venting and acknowledge it. So I would say something like, it is clear to me that you value this, this, and this, and you feel very strongly, you have a passion for this. Now, with regard to this, to the current situation, what would you like to see happen? So you kind of redirect and ask for the other person for a solution, and then you can put in your 2 bits worth. If someone doesn't feel heard, they will keep on asserting and saying the same thing over and over in different ways. So one of the key things in conflict is to acknowledge the other person's point of view, be respectful, allow venting of emotions, and then redirect them back to the current situation. What shall we do about it? What can we do about it? What are some ideas you have to do something about it? I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you make an interesting point. You often see people that are very good at managing conflict, who have that ability to really listen to the person and understand exactly what that's upset them and identify that and acknowledge it. And it's that listening skill that puts them on the right stead to kind of manage the conflict quickly and appropriately.
Absolutely. And listening is a gift. I wish I could do a workshop or webinar on listening, because we don't listen very well. And, you know, the Bible says be quick to listen and slow to speak. Instead, more often than not, we are quicker to speak than we are to listen. And listening will go a long way in managing conflict.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great topic, and you heard it here first, folks. That'll be invited out shortly to learn from Dr. Jeannie Trudel about how to listen effectively. We do have just one final. Yeah, there's just one more, Jeannie. How would you manage conflict in the workplace when your colleague is away, absent, sick, or doesn't reply to your email?
That is the conflict that you are left with. The other person may not have the conflict because it doesn't bother them as much. I think that's more in terms of, if it depends on whether that's a direct report, a peer, or your boss or your supervisor, because those, depending on that relationship, your strategy may be a bit different. Let's say it's a peer that's absent and not responding. If there's no direct response and you've attempted a few times, you may have to escalate it and ask someone above you to help. Now, if it's your boss, there's not much that you can do about it, correct? Because you can't demand that your boss or your supervisor respond to you. The next time you see the person, whether a peer or direct report or your supervisor, you may be able to connect and say, I'm just concerned about you because I haven't seen you, and apparently you've been sick, etc. So come out of a position of concern, not necessarily accusatory, because that won't get you anywhere, and allow the other person a chance to share what's going on. If you don't get anywhere, that's something else, and you may have to seek counsel outside of your unit, or seek support elsewhere.
Great, thanks, Jeannie. I hope that's answered that listener's question. If we don't have any more, I think we might wrap up there. The webinar is recorded, so if you've found this particularly useful and want to share it with a colleague, you'll get the recording emailed to you in the next few days, and please share it with anyone that you think might find it of value. If you do have ideas for webinar topics, please feel free to contact us. We'd love to hear from you. And again, we'd be delighted to hear from you about your study ambition and how you might want to continue on your learning journey after today. But thanks so much, Jeannie, for sharing all of this wonderful insight. I've certainly taken a lot away from it, and I hope everyone on the line has as well.
Thanks very much, Amelia. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.